Hello, everyone. Hello, technology project leaders, and thanks for joining me today. So, as we know, technology projects are not always easy, but they should be straightforward. So, my goal is to simplify complexity and accelerate your technology projects to help you scale your business. And on each of these episodes, I always like to teach you how to scale your business with technology. And this week, it's all about building your dream team. And that's why I'm really pleased to be sitting down with Alan Zell. Welcome to the show, Alan.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, just as part of the introduction, Alan, maybe just a quick background on you and what you do, so the listeners can and viewers can get to know you.
Sure. So I have been in recruitment and staffing for approximately 25 years. I started the first 13 years of my career exclusively in executive search, mostly senior placements. And I opened up my own firm, Zell Human Capital, in 2012 or 2011, 2012. And over the last 12 years, as an independent boutique, we work at all levels and we help companies build teams. As I say, some people come to recruiters, and there are recruiters like that, that are there to help them find jobs. What our job is to do is we help jobs find people
Yeah.
and keep the job at the core of it. And so, what's interesting, though, the team building things bled into an idea I had in 2016. It wasn't an original idea because that's where the market was going. When I saw the staffing industry grow, realizing that
Mm.
executive search and one-off placements many ways was quite different, but in other ways was very similar because it is still recruitment. I opened up Akinu, which is a technology staffing firm which builds teams of technology developers, and taking some of the rudiments from executive retained search and putting it into staffing and sort of having it as a separate company, but with many of the same philosophies as Zell Human Capital. We've been very successful over the last 6 years. We have some implementations that have run as large as 30 people, for one client. A bit of a niche. What we do is we often help U.S. companies build teams up in Canada because we're very pro Canada here,
Yeah, absolutely.
and so from that standpoint, but we also help U.S. companies find U.S. people. But essentially, at the end of it, it's always keeping the requirements, in terms of whether it's an individual senior search or an entire team as the focus, as I said, about the job, not the individual. But at the same time, I've had great opportunities to meet excellent candidates, learn a lot from them over the last 25 years. So in some ways, while it's secondary, I definitely feel that I work for my candidates too, while maintaining integrity towards the position.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, yeah, I've had a great run in two very different sides of recruitment and staffing. And, it as we're well into 2023 now, and a couple of years out of a pandemic, it continues to be a lot of fun. So we're having a great
Yeah.
time.
Absolutely. So let's zoom in on finding good candidates in that dream team, because a lot of the challenge these days is that the traditional job adverts on the boards doesn't work anymore, because typically if you're advertising for a role and people apply, they're already looking for a job. They're already not necessarily happy in their roles looking out, but the star performers are busy. They're already with people with other organizations. So a lot of the challenge I'm seeing with my clients is, how do we find good people? And that's why I wanted to chat to you more and dig a bit deeper into that, into some of the key ways. So let's just zoom in on you help roles find people. And so when you're coming across a role there, Alan, where would you start in terms of trying to find those gems and that dream team?
Well, it's interesting because we put the role at the focus
Hmm.
before we start thinking about what kind of individual we're looking for, and then it bleeds into that. So let me say, I like the premise of today's topic, which is of today's podcast, which is building the right team. So an individual is one piece of that puzzle. What's important to us is to have a vision of what the organization is and work our way out. So what kind of organization is this? Where are they at in terms of their own cycle? What does the ecosystem or value chain look like? And then build towards the role. What is the legacy of this role? What is the history
Right.
of it? Is there an incumbent? Is it a new role? And with understanding all of these things, we know that even if we're not hiring the entire team, this person will walk into a team. So we need to look at it holistically and understand who's going to fit in there. Now, there's three elements to what would make an individual fit into a role when we put the role as the focus. Number one is experience. Number two are skills. And then the third, the elusive one, which we call the fit, the personality.
Personality, yep.
And some people don't distinguish between experience and skills, but they're key and they're important. So experience, of course, is industry experience or functional experience. It's exactly what the job description looks like.
I've done this before.
Exactly. But skills, sometimes, if you have the latitude to do that, may transcend some of the experience. For example, let's just say you have a scenario where a client is looking for a specific individual to start a new role. I'll start with that. We can come back to whether you're filling a role that's now empty. So it's a new role and they're building it. And we work together to build the consummate job description. And we have all the criteria in the job description and all the different requirements, if you will, experience, skills, and what have you. So skills are secondary, but let's start with the experience. And we will ideally present a short list on let's say on the traditional search side. The team is different because we're looking for a certain set of developers and that's it. But let's go back to if we're doing it on the traditional search side. So we'll present 5 or 6 candidates. For the sake of this discussion, let's look at 6. We will present them to people that have the exact requirements, skills, everything that they're looking for on paper. X number of years, this industry experience, et cetera, et cetera. Even, tenure, what have you. We'll call them candidates 1 and 2, A and B. Candidates 3 and 4 might have half of it or 2/3, but they're faring pretty strong on the skill side. And skills, not to oversimplify it, is perhaps they don't have that exact experience, but through the skills they have, they will be successful. And more than that, because people say, well, all skills are transferable. That's not true. That is not true. It's a little bit more complex than that. So for example, we have to look at things laterally. We have to say, okay, let's say company X is a manufacturer of widgets, and we go to the competitors across the street and we find the exact person or people that are doing that role for their competitor. It looks like a slam dunk. It's easy. But what if their competitor is a different environment, a different culture? What if their competitor is not a company they want to emulate? What if their competitor doesn't have the best talent? So from that standpoint, the person will, by default, hit every criteria that individual is looking for, but they may not be the best person. That's when skills come in. So let's say we have somebody, like I said, candidates 3 and 4 before we get to 5 and 6. 3 and 4, perhaps they're a supplier to the widget manufacturer. Perhaps they have, a certain analogous set of experiences that are close to it, but not quite there. But it's synergistic. It's similar. Instead of widgets, they're making wadgets. I don't know, but something in a sense that's close enough. But they have great skills, and they're dynamic, and they seem to be a great fit to the organization. But I'm not done. Candidates 5 and 6, this is where as a recruiter, I sometimes have to get a little more ambitious. I will present people who may at first blush not have very much of what the job description is looking for. There has to be table stakes. They have to be a certain level of their career. I'm not going to bring in a lawyer for an engineering role. I'm not going to bring an engineer for a lawyer role. But for general business, let's say, the individual doesn't come from that industry. They don't have as many years, and they've sort of worked in a very different environment. But in their tenure, they achieved exactly what our client wants this person to do, and that's not something that someone from the competitor did. So they have the skills, the background, and what I'll call lateral experience. That's what I call it, whereby they accomplish the same goals using that same set of skills, but selling something different in a different environment in a positive way.
Yes, almost that secret sauce.
Well, that's the thing. Like, it's always struck me where I've had clients say, we don't have much talent in our industry, but we want you to find somebody from our competitor. So, I mean, at the end of the day, and it should be that lucky. Sometimes they're not aware that the best talent isn't in their industry, but they're so fixated on, well, there's no learning curve. We know that they're somewhat successful there. but that's not taking the leap. And I will tell you, 1 out of 5 times they'll take a leap with me, get somebody who wasn't as strong on paper per se, but more often than not, that individual will be far more successful than the person that was the easy hire who had
Yeah.
everything we're looking for. And
Yes.
from that perspective, I also encourage candidates, if they feel to work with me on this, and if they feel that they're right for it, not to necessarily not be willing to be bold and put themselves out there. Now, I have to say no more to people than I get to say yes in my job, but sometimes a candidate will sell me on themselves, and more often than not, I will sell them and convince them, say, look, I know this is hilarious. Usually a recruiter will say, sorry, you're not right for this. But I'm saying, I see something here. And I'll ask them some questions. How did you achieve it? What did you do in that? And the answer is filled exactly the way my client may want it. So I will then be able to say, this is what's truly transferable. Not an industry, not a function, none of that, but exactly what they did and how. I dig deeper. I ask the what and the how. They're equally important to me rather than just a laundry list of things. How did you achieve it? What's your modus operandi? What's made you successful? And if those ingredients will match to what my client needs to achieve, then I will be very, very happy to present them.
Right. So I want to get back into the interview questions because you touched on a few really good ones around making sure you ask, what did you specifically do, your role and your output?
Absolutely.
But I just want to zoom back to two sides of the story here. So as someone recruiting, you mentioned that we have to be clear on the organization's goals, what roles we're trying to fill from a bigger picture, organization, project, ambitions point of view. So we know we're getting the right team in. And then the other question would be, as a candidate, how would I present myself well so I get picked up for these roles? What do you look for in candidates?
So the number one thing, and I'll use cliches work. So even though they're cliches, sometimes they do work. And less of a cliche, the old expression, and I think it was tied to Gene Kelly, who used to tell young performers and dancers, if you fail to prepare, you should prepare to fail.
Right.
Preparation is key. Understand, before you're going to claim to me that you're right for this role, understand the role. Understand what you're saying, because if I have some concerns, it's up to you to demonstrate to me that you've done the sufficient research and you understand the company, well, at least in what's publicly available. Let me preface, until you lift the hood, you don't know what's underneath. And so, but there's public information and
lots available to find.
Lots available to find. So there's no excuse to not understand essentially at a very high level what this company is about, what they're trying to do. And if you can match that to what you've done and what you want to do and present me a compelling case on that, then that's great. As I said, sometimes I see it and I approach you and then, it goes the other way. But for a candidate, be prepared, understand, the organization, and to whatever degree you can, try to understand the culture and the people. Again, that's a little more elusive, it's more qualitative, but just do as much research as you can with anything that's available. Be curious about so many elements of the company, and walk in, even from that first meeting, with a bit of a mini plan. The more you know, the more your plan will grow. Look, for president and CEOs, it's not uncommon to ask them to do presentations when you're down to. But I say to people, every meeting is a conversation and every conversation is a meeting. So from that standpoint, you're always presenting.
Be prepared for that.
Absolutely. Have some independent thoughts. Don't just recite your resume. Have some unique thoughts that apply to why you'd be a good fit for this. And the only way you could do that is to really do your homework, do your research, and be well prepared. So I can't emphasize preparation more.
Yes. And ask questions as well going into the role. I've often asked my candidates to position their resumes based on the role they're applying for rather than just the standard off-the-shelf resume. So tailor your resume. If there's keywords around the role, make sure you have those key roles around the technology or the skill they're looking for. And then more importantly, what I look for as well is the results on the resume. Don't just list out the role description on the resume. List out what you actually did and the results you achieved. And most people can find something. People go, well, I can't attribute it to dollars or cost savings or growth or things like that. And it's like, well, no, sometimes it's you helped implement a new process. You were lead of streamlining some documentation, which then sped up the hiring process or something like that. So it's really identifying those results on your resume to get past that initial screening.
Absolutely. You know what I tell people in the vein of what you said is be very careful. Never understate or overstate what you've done. Find
Mm,
the medium. So, for example, as you said, sometimes you have to encourage them to find things that are, that they can promote, accomplishments, achievements. On the other hand, when you start listing achievements, be very prepared to back up that you were actually, if not leading them, certainly had a major contribution. As I
mm,
said, on the one hand, I'd rather pull somebody out who's humble and get to the root of it than somebody who claims responsibility for a number of things that they just happened to be around while they happened and
yeah.
didn't really have a direct hand. And adept and recruiters and that are discerning will be able to figure that out. Unlike that line in the song from the play Hamilton, being in the room isn't everything. If you were just
Mm.
in the room but you really weren't leading it, that's not going to cut it. You
No,
were
room meat.
that achieved this, but you had nothing to do with it. Well, great. That's called riding coattails. And in the end, just because you were around it, if you didn't participate, we're not convinced that you'd be able to emulate that. So as I said, make sure what you can back up everything you've said in terms of, and it comes back to that question, how? I'm impressed
Mm.
with what you did. Now tell me how you did it. And
Yeah,
those
what was your role, and what
back,
what what was the outcome that you achieved specifically as well? And if they start saying about, well, we did this and our team did this, it's like, okay, that's good, but what was your specific contribution?
I'll go further than that. Some people are duplicitous enough where they're smart enough to know that, oh, I did this, I did that, and they're taking responsibility for it. And when it's something I just have an intrinsic sense of saying, this doesn't feel right, I then ask
Mm,
achieved, and that's what stumps them. This is what I'm saying. You cannot fake how. You can fake what, when, and some of the other W and all the other W's. You can even fake why. Well, we did this because the president wanted this and this. Okay, well, how'd you do it? That's what stumps them.
yeah.
So try to dig in to find the modus operandi, and essentially, just by the question how, which they're often not prepared for, you may be able to find out whether they did really achieve it or not.
Yeah. And that touches on another point as well, is in the screening going into the interviews as well, because especially with the options around Upwork and the Fivers of the world, and sometimes hiring talent out on a different continent requires an extra level of diligence. And so some of the roles I've hired for and worked with other clients to hire for as well, I've actually given them a mini project to do as part of that initial, once they get through the screening. So there's initial personality tests, questionnaires, initial questions on the role, your experiences. And then I may actually pay them a nominal fee to work on a plan, on a design, on a working through a problem that's not obviously specific to the company, but enough for me to get information and also get value from it as well. Because if I see that and see it's a good outcome, I can then have them pick, if they're successful, pick that up and run with it in the company, so they're hitting the ground running very quickly. And
No, that makes
yeah,
sense.
and that's another option I've seen that can work really well. Again, you have to be very specific about the project or that little mini task, and be prepared to pay some people to do it. But it can be a nominal fee to do that.
I agree. I think there's so many tools now available and ways to extrapolate what you need to, and I
Mm,
fully support that, because at the core, if it will showcase their understanding and ability to maybe not get it right. That's the other thing. Even in these situations, when you ask them to give their independent thoughts about the company per se or a presentation, what you're looking for, and I've heard this even on the technology side when they do coding tests for developers and stuff,
mm,
we're not always looking for the best answer. We're trying to determine how you think,
ow.
approach
Yep.
problems. Again, it's the how.
Yes.
Coming back
Yeah.
to how. And so even if your answer is like, well, that's not how we would do it, but I like how you approached it, or yeah, but you're not factoring this in. Well, you couldn't have factored that in because you didn't know that. So
Yes.
uh,
Yeah.
so it's really a way of determining how people do things, how they approach things, far less than expecting exact, precise, perfect answers in these types of exercises.
Mm. And it goes back to where we started with this, with that hiring that dream team. So, from a hiring leader, technology manager point of view, or director, what do you need from your team? I'd always say, look at your current team as is right now. there may be gaps in the roles, the personalities, or the skills or experience, then I'm going to also say first look internally. There might be someone in another team, another area department who could actually be trained up, upskilled into the role you need. And then if that doesn't work, then to start looking outwards as well, but as that holistic picture of the team.
I think that's really important. Let me go into that vein and start with the fact that I'm confident in my ability to provide a great service to my clients. I've been doing this 25 years. The first thing I ask them is, have you tried to look internally?
Yeah.
I don't ask them if they've tried to look externally because, quite frankly, they're very good at a lot of things I can't do. I would say I am probably much better than them at looking externally. They can take shortcuts, they can do all that, but if they're looking externally, the services I will provide will be better than what they're able to do internally. But that aside, have you looked internally? Because I would much rather you find that future diamond, or that person that's a diamond in the rough, let's say, in your company. Give them an opportunity. That works on so many levels. They're already there. They know the culture, even if they don't know the specific role in the group. And then you're showing that this is a company that promotes from within and gives opportunities. And that's good for everybody.
Yes.
I will always encourage them to make sure that they've determined that. And most of the time they have. So that's one thing. I would also caution, I'll play devil's advocate for a second. You could have two different departments in the same company, particularly larger companies where the culture is very different. So it doesn't necessarily mean that somebody in the same company will work well for this manager or this situation. So chemistry, culture fit, even within this applies more to larger organizations. In smaller organizations, you tend to maintain a more cohesive, consistent culture across the board. But culture is key. So when you're building the team, going back to where we started, yes, you have to think about where this individual will be. And that's where that third factor comes in, which is the culture and the fit, because we've kind of hit on the first two, experience and skills, and I've delineated the difference between the two, and where sometimes without having all the experience, the right skilled person who's done similar things, perhaps in a different way, could be successful. But culture, I would say in some ways, culture may or may not be king or queen. At the end of the day, what you want to build is an effective culture, not necessarily a culture where everyone's the same either. And with the advancement of diversity, I've always rooted it back. And of course, we are key instruments in helping our clients and the workforce in general pursue diversity. But it's not just a diversity of
ethnicity,
background. It's diversity of thought.
Yes, exactly.
It's beyond even, sometimes it's about culture, but sometimes it's just, you have people within certain groups that think quite differently from one another. So the assumption that by bringing somebody else in who might be from that same group, or somebody who isn't from that group, that you're going to get the same or different, you have to look at every individual and see how they think, see how basically neurotypical or neuroatypical they may be. And I embrace both. Divergent thinkers are effective, but you don't want too many of them. Linear thinkers are effective, but you don't want too many of them.
Exactly. It's the balance, right?
Absolutely. And so always a big proponent of diversity of thought equal to diversity of other characteristics.
Yeah. And I just want to build on that as well, because when people talk about diversity, sometimes, often just having someone new in the group makes the existing group prepare more, because that new person is, okay, where are they coming from? What are they doing? What are they going to think? What questions are they going to ask? And that steps up the performance of the team.
Absolutely.
And so looping back to when you're looking, sorry, say again?
That's a great point. I mean, absolutely. It's a breath of fresh air. It's a change of scenery, and it's also the idea to share your thoughts with somebody new, which tends to, by either consciously or unconsciously, motivate and excite people.
Yes. And then going back to the hiring question, when you're looking for a gap in your team, sometimes it's difficult to find that person. So then start looking internally. The other option is you may actually not need to hire someone new. You may actually just need that fresh perspective from having another department, another friend, colleague from another area in your business come in and then just start to brainstorm the problem you're working through. And that might send the team in a slightly different direction to solve the problem of the role you're trying to fill. So there's that aspect as well. And so again, there's lots of options to hiring. When people think about this dream team and I need people, think about the outcome you want to achieve for your business organization, and then how could we achieve that, and look internally, externally as well.
Oh no, I fully agree. And it's collaboration, and
Yeah.
you new people, if it's the right new person, will foster new collaboration. But you know what? If you, like you said, if you pull out somebody different, if you bring in a consultant, if you stimulating collaboration is the key to success in any situation. You're right. A new person can be the catalyst. Sometimes that new person is there because someone left or was let go. Sometimes a new person is there because it was determined that there's a new need in the group. But at the end of the day, I like where you went with this. The newness stimulates freshness, and that can come from things outside of hiring. So even though that's outside of what I do, I fully embrace your idea there. And I think that kind of stimulation from having a fresh perspective. And to that point, you brought up other examples. I would add, yes, bring in an external consultant as another option. Could be that as a short-term opportunity to stimulate the group, as you said.
Yeah, even just conversations as well. It doesn't have to be a formal engagement or project with someone external. It can be just, hey, we'd just like to chat and just understand what's going on, and then go from there.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And then
what can be achieved in a matter of a conversation or two.
Absolutely. So then, as a candidate, as someone who's potentially in a role, is thinking, I could maybe look around, see what else is going on out there, looking for something different. What advice would you give candidates for being spotted, for raising their hand and catching the eye of someone like yourself?
Well, first thing I would say is right now, compared to when I started 25 years ago, the world is at everyone's fingertips. Sorry for quite a cliche, but it's an obvious statement. When LinkedIn came out 13, 14 years ago, many people, skeptics, said, oh, you're done. Recruiters are done. I said, are you kidding me? This is the greatest thing that's happened to us. Because if all recruiters did was find people and that was their only value, then we should just pack it up anyway. No, this made things accessible, people accessible, and it gave people an opportunity to, rather than a static resume, create this dynamic presence online. And of course, that's what I would suggest, to the degree that you are able to make sure your LinkedIn profile is fresh and updated. Try to add things to spruce it up. New projects you've worked on. LinkedIn's an amazing platform to showcase your abilities. And I wanted to, if not, forget it, daily, hourly, I'm on it. And it's a tremendous tool. It's the reason we're here today, actually. It's how you and I found each other.
Exactly.
So I couldn't be a bigger proponent of that. So make sure that your LinkedIn profile is certainly up to date, but also with as much detail as you're able to provide. Don't necessarily go as deep as a resume. You don't have to put every, like, for example, the what is key there. So
what have you done?
The accomplishments don't necessarily need every achievement, every sales quota, etc. But definitely each role and the basic responsibilities and a few key achievements while you were there, without running off the full resume. So the other thing to do is, from a more philosophical level, as we're I see we're about to wrap this up, I would say, keep an open mind.
Yes.
It's important. But just like I'll do an inversion here again. When a client will say, I didn't use you last time, but we found somebody and we're okay, we're happy. And I don't want to debate them on that. If they're happy, then I'm happy. But I would always say, but you don't know what you would have had if you'd had an open search. You may have still ended up with that person, or you could have had somebody that was an even better fit. And in the end, everything happens the way it's supposed to. Well, I'll invert that to the candidate. You're happy? That's great. I always joke that I don't want to sound predatory, but I'm a recruiter. I'm a headhunter. So at the end of the day, I'm presenting you, and I never force candidates. I don't try to overly persuade. Sure, there's a certain degree I sell the opportunity, but I would say to you, I'm sure you're happy. We love happy people. Yes, it sounds predatory. We don't want people that are necessarily unhappy that leave every day.
Exactly. Disgruntled employees are not who you want to hire.
No, and generally they result in a lot of turnover and annual new positions. What we want is somebody that has sufficient, more, as we call it, the push and the pull. What is going to pull you to this opportunity? Well, that's my job and my client's job. But the push, Well, in every situation, particularly if you've been there 3 to 5 years, which is a typical tenure now, you're either feeling a little stale or some changes have gone on, or you've achieved what you wanted to achieve and there's not much more room. There's always going to be something. It shouldn't be after a year or two, but the longer you're there, there's going to be more push. And what
Mm,
I say is, will my opportunity present you with something that's going to help take you to the next level in a
absolutely.
way that your current opportunity won't?
Doesn't. Yeah.
And so that to me is the key. So keep an open mind, just as I tell my clients, keep an open mind and be willing to listen. Always be willing to listen, because you lose nothing and you could potentially gain a lot.
Yeah. And what I'll leave the listeners and viewers with one quick tip as well around interviews is whenever you have an interview, always send a follow-up thank you note, which is also an opportunity just to highlight some key points or key achievements that were raised in the interview that you may have forgotten to mention or you wanted to emphasize. The amount of people who don't send a follow-up note is quite staggering, and it's an easy differentiator to show your value.
Well, the only thing I would add to that is, and I may have other recruiters that might disagree with me on that. I would 100% agree with you for the client interview, but
Yes.
for recruiters, I humbly say there's a certain element of informality that we're comfortable with,
Yes.
but for a client,
Oh,
your idea is
yes.
brilliant. So
Yeah, and that's what I mean for the client. Absolutely.
absolutely, and some people, I receive thank you notes all the time. I would say I have a mild appreciation to an indifference, but that's okay. And if I really like them, it would have made no difference. But it's a pleasantry, and it definitely shows a civility. But for the client, it's very important.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to thank you now, Alan. So thank you for
Thank
your
you.
time. And if
Super.
people want to find you, where can they reach out to you?
So it's the firm is zellhumancapital.com. We also have akinu.com, which is the other firm. And of course, I'm available on LinkedIn, which is, again,
Yes.
found me. And I keep my LinkedIn profile. Well, you'll see, and I can say this, we'll have perhaps another chat about my third business. I am a business manager and a partner in an media and entertainment company that promotes musicians. So
Okay, awesome.
that's
Yeah, I'd
all.
love to talk more about that.
It's still talent management, but in a very different way. And so you can learn a little bit more about me on my LinkedIn profile as well. Yeah, that's basically where you would find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you for joining, Alan, and thank you everyone for joining me today. We're all a special group of technology project leaders, and we're here cheering you on. So as you
Thank
continue to push, grow, and scale and make a difference with technology, we'll see you in the next episode. Bye
thank
for
you.
now.
Bye.